Thank you. Just watching to see if they reset my clock. It's like an NBA game. All right. Well, let me start.
Reset the clock.
That's all right. We'll figure it out. I'll tell you when it's time is up. Don't worry. When Vladimir Putin decided to interfere in our elections, you would agree he undertook a cost-benefit analysis. This is what the price would be for doing this. This is the benefit I think I would gain from it. And so where it leaves us is we have to do two things. We have to defend against potential interference, election systems and the like. But I think the other is we have to make sure that the price is higher than the benefit. And that actually points to one of the things you've already mentioned, and that is what we've already done. If you start to line up some of the things that we've done in response to that and other things, it's a pretty extensive list of, including things we've been asking for 4 years that have finally happened. The Javelin anti-tank missiles for Ukraine and Georgia, the support of NATO's new posture in Central and Eastern Europe, the variety of designations under both Ukraine and cyber-related executive orders that were from the Obama administration, sanctions under CATSA, and I know there's more to come for cybersecurity, several rounds of designation of individuals for weapons proliferation, terror, and transnational crime, export restrictions on entities that violated the INF Treaty. We closed consulates in San Francisco and in Seattle. We closed an annex in D.C. We closed the trade office in New York. After the poison nerve gas attack in the U.K., we expelled 60 other diplomats. All of those things happened under this administration. And these are pretty substantial, including the sanctions. But obviously, even that price is not high enough because the intelligence community continues to tell us that they are postured and are actively engaged in both attacking our democracy and posturing to do more of that in the future. So my question is along the lines of a piece of legislation that Senator Van Hollen and I and a group of other senators have jumped on board on, and it aims to do three things. One is sort of define interference. Okay, it's not just 5 Russian guys on Twitter. I mean, it's define it in terms of its meaning to our republic. Require the Director of National Intelligence to issue a report within 30 days of the election about whether or not interference occurred, and then put in statute a menu of very crippling sanctions. And the purpose of that would be so that Vladimir Putin knows before he makes this decision going to 18 or in the future, this is the price I will pay if I do this again. That's why it's called the Deter Act, to get on the front end of it. I don't ask you to opine on the bill, because I know you don't have it before you, but on the concept of building in deterrence on the front end, is that not an approach that we can take to hopefully deter him from doing this in the future by making him clearly understand how high the price would be in comparison to the benefit?
Senator, I completely agree with you that there is a cost-benefit calculation that's undertaken before the Russians act. So it follows necessarily that putting on notice with essentially a fail-safe, if you will, about things that will follow has the likelihood of being successful in raising the cost in terms of how he calculates risk associated with a wide range of actions.
You'll be asked plenty about Russia, so I don't want to undermine that, but I think the single biggest national security threat in the long term to the United States is China. I mean, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, we are in competition with a near-peer adversary. And it's not just military, it's economic, it's technological, it's geopolitical and the like. We've seen their impressive and massive military buildup, the quantum leaps they're making in technology. We see that the work they're undertaking to sort of destroy the U.S. world order and rebuild it to one more of their liking. We've seen the gains they've made in 5G alone. I mean, China Mobile will be the only company in the world that can build standalone 5G networks by 2020. And what's really outrageous is many of these advances are not the result of hard work and ingenuity. They're also the result of intellectual property theft, forced transfers, and the like. This is part of a tactic that they've been using for a while. The Chinese, and I think the South China Sea is a great example of it, they don't make these big sweeping changes. It's sort of a sustained, sort of slow and incremental, but more assertive demands each time, creating new normals along the way. And what they've done in the South China Sea is evidence of that. And the only ways that seem to work in response to their aggression are two things. The first is committed and sustained escalation across the relationship, meaning you don't carve out pieces of it. They do it that way. We have to do it that way. Our whole relationship, sustained and committed pressure. And the other is invoking the help of our foreign partners. And what I'm troubled by in regards to the administration posture on this is on the working with, invoking the help of our foreign partners has become complicated because we're currently engaged with trade disputes with the EU and Japan, Mexico and Canada, which we should have teamed up with to confront them. And I understand trade is an issue that needs to be addressed, but I don't know why we didn't address China first together and then dealt with our allies second. And the other is the sustained and committed escalation across the entire relationship. And on that front, I'm puzzled by the decision the administration made on ZTE. And I know that was not a State Department decision, it was a Commerce one, because I agree that if the ZTE issue was simply a sanctions violation, the penalties imposed have been devastating. But ZTE is more than a sanctions threat to the United States. It is part of a broader telecommunication threat that the Chinese industries pose to the United States. And to threaten to shut them down and then pull back from it is not the sort of committed and sustained escalation across the entire relationship. The carving out of one company sends them the message that they can pick away at different parts of that relationship and undermine our willingness to sustain pressure on them to get a better equilibrium. So I don't know what the State Department's role was in that decision, but moving forward, what is our broader strategic approach to the threat that China poses? Because they don't seek parity, they seek to overtake us.
Senator, you have laid out what I think is the principal challenge for the United States over the coming years, maybe a decade. The issue of China, you talk about they've got a lot of folks and a big economy that puts them in the position to be a competitor to the United States in the way a country like Russia with an economy smaller than Italy's can't maintain over some period of time. And so we do need a broad, comprehensive response. And I think all of the West, not just the United States, was too slow in seeing this. Your point about how they turned up the heat slowly over time, I think that recognition is there. But I don't believe that the structures are in place today to respond to that in a way comprehensively. I was with our Australian partners yesterday at a meeting with Secretary Mattis, myself, and our Australian counterparts. They just passed a set of non-interference rules on China. They are getting up to speed in the same way that as you all took a look at CFIUS and FIRMA. We're getting up to speed. We are beginning to strike that comprehensive response versus China that I think will ultimately do what has historically happened, allow America to prevail.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator.